Yo, what is going down? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the memories!
Show me the memories. That's exactly what it is. I'm Austin Hayden, and I'm joined by the Show Me the Meaning crew. We have Raymond.
Hey, gang.
And we've got Ryan.
What's up, film fans?
And this week we're going to be talking about the mind-bending piece that spilled out of Charlie Kaufman's mind that was placed into the hands of Michel Gondry, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind,
and
starring Jim
Pierre
Carrey. Or whatever.
There's a third writer in there named Pierre something. I'm sorry. He's like some abstract French artist guy. I don't know. Anyway, just giving the guy a little credit. All right. Sorry to derail
Give
you.
the love where it's due. Yes. Sorry to Pierre. Pierre, you as well. Starring Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet, Mark Ruffalo, Kirsten Dunst, Elijah Wood, and Tom Wilkinson. As always, we're going to go around and get first impressions. What was it like the first time that we saw this movie? How many times have we seen this on repeated viewings? Does this film stay with us? Does it last with us? And what was it like watching it the most recent time? Now, was this one of the films that one of us excitedly chose in our list of films that we really, really, really wanted to cover? And if so, who was it? Give me a hand up real quick here.
I assume it's been on one of my lists at some point.
I thought it was yours, Austin. Matt said it was yours.
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't know if it was...
or maybe Matt snookered us and put one of his favorites on the list.
No, this is a great friggin' film. I to be completely honest, it may have been mine. I don't remember my list.
Yeah, let's have you go first then. Yeah, first time watching it.
Okay.
This time watching it. Let's go.
All right, so I literally don't remember the first time I watched this film. I've seen it a bunch of times. Charlie Kaufman's one of my favorite writers / filmmakers, right? I think Ryan and I have talked about Synecdoche, New York before. Did we cover it on this podcast?
It's all melding together. I think we have.
I know.
I think we probably have, honestly.
If we haven't, we've talked about it enough, and we've probably created like a fake podcast version in our own minds. But I don't know. Yeah, sure. I feel like we must have. But I love Charlie Kaufman. I love his kind of like neurotic self-obsession. I really love Anomalisa. Obviously, Adaptation is fantastic. John Malkovich, et cetera, right? So there's something about his style that I'm really drawn to that I think is quite unique. And I've listened to him talk a lot about kind of his own approach to writing, storytelling, and then just, I guess, as an observer of the human condition. So I find it very fascinating. So when I think about this film, that's what I think about. I don't even remember my first time watching it. I just kind of think of, one, a couple of the scenes that stand out to me, and then two, I think of like this as being Charlie Kaufman just opening up his mind and saying, hey, welcome to my weird world. And so that's always what I think of when I think of this film. But watching it last night was really nice and really lovely. I was really trying to pick up on certain themes. I was really trying to think a lot about, someone asked on Twitter, they said, is it a sad ending? And I was really trying to think about, memory, identity, the pains that are caused in our lives. Would we want them to be erased? Would we even be who we are if we erased them? There's that great bit where Jim Carrey's like, will this cause brain damage? And the doctor Stan is essentially like, actually, it is brain damage.
It's a great line.
Yeah, and so I was thinking a lot about that, and talking with the girl a bit about like what did we think about this film and themes, and I really also was kind of drawn to the character of Clem as being a sort of like subversion of the manic pixie dream girl stereotype as well that I think we can play through. And then I thought a lot about that ending, and then there are some philosophical themes. Nietzsche gets quoted a bit, and so there's a lot of richness that is obviously going to come out from this film, but I was really kind of trying to tap into it last night and then this morning in my own thoughts. So I think it's a fantastic film. Also just at like a level of enjoyment. I think it's really fucking fun. It's clever, it's smart, it's beautiful. I think the direction is really slick. And yeah, so I think it's kind of perfect for our podcast, to be honest. So, all right, Ryan, what about you, brother?
Yeah, not to be too hyperbolic, but I think this is one of the best movies ever made.
Wow.
I love the shit out of this movie. And the first time I saw it, I thought that I was the perfect age because I was like, in high school, I saw it in the movie theater and I was just getting into indie cinema and whatever, that entailed in the early 2000s or whatever. And so like to me, this was like yeah, like what you just said, all those adjectives, the smartest, most intelligent. It's just using cinema and all the bells and whistles and tools that you have, you know, whereas the soundtrack by John Bryan, the direction by Michel Gondry, an incredible script by Charlie Kaufman, and then insanely good performances that are kind of off cast by everybody involved, you know, like Jim Carrey playing somebody you're not used to Jim Carrey playing, you know, Elijah Wood all of a sudden not being a hobbit, he's just kind of weird dude. You know, Kirsten Dunst is not Mary Jane anymore. She's, you know, this weird scientist. It was just everybody firing on all cylinders to make a completely unique piece of art. I kind of got to give the most credit, I would say, to Michel Gondry and obviously Charlie Kaufman, but I think Michel Gondry's direction and super inventive cinematography, I guess you'd say, that he kind of carries through all of his movies, but this is, to me, the best version of it. To me, this is the best Charlie Kaufman movie and the best Michel Gondry movie. And having seen another 20 years of their output, like, I kind of, once I originally saw this movie, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to see every movie they make. And I still watch every movie they make. But to me, that was their peak, at least so far.
Agreed.
For both of them. Like, to me, this is the most accessible Charlie Kaufman is. Like you said, it's super sad but beautiful and hopeful in a weird way, and it ends on such a, I'm sure we'll get into the ending, but it's such a tragic ending, but it also is such a, he somehow just sucks in all this hope out of the tragedy at the end to make you leave on like a wow, yeah, you're right, life is awesome and it's gonna go on, and let's just carpe diem, fuck it, who cares what happened earlier, you know, which I love about this movie. And I don't think Michel Gondry has really made a banger like this. I love Mood Indigo. If you're into his stuff, go watch. It's a very bizarre, weird French movie. Didn't love Sound of Science. Yeah, he really hasn't made this is his most accessible movie too, in a good way. Yeah, Science of Sleep. Yeah. Anyway, long story short,
I was really
shit out of this movie.
I was disappointed in Science of Sleep, actually, because it was after this, right? Or at least I saw it after this.
It was almost directly after this. And he's somebody that needs that awesome script as a foundation for his weird, wacky cinematography. Because to me, Sound of Sleep or Science of Sleep or whatever the fuck is just like his cinematography, and that's kind of it. That is what you're
exactly.
You know, whereas Mood Indigo is that too, but it's so inventive and so bizarre and so strange and has a little bit more of a more accessible love story that I think works with his style. But this to me is such a unique thing. Eternal Sunshine of Rocks. Cool. I love the shit out of it. Sorry to gush.
Raymond, what about you, brother?
I mean, just keep it rolling. I think this is a great movie. I saw this, I think this came out in 2004. And I grew up in a pretty small town that didn't get, you know, more indie movies to the theaters and stuff, you know, really nothing outside the mainstream. So I kind of had to wait until it came out on DVD to be able to watch it, but it was extremely on my radar because I remember all this buzz surrounding it, that, you know, Jim Carrey has all this Oscar potential, which, you know, whatever awards are worth to you, I'm not crazy about award shows, but if this isn't awards worthy acting, I don't know what is. This is just a great cast all around, Jim Carrey included. Maybe his best performance, but I digress. This is a movie that I think when I finally saw it, I was maybe 15, and it was one of those flicks that you kind of mentioned, Ryan, that I think maybe a lot of folks our age feel this way, was sort of a formative cinephile experience where
absolutely
this along with this movie, I would put Kill Bill Volume 1 is the one that I always point to as you know, while that may not be my favorite movie now, but back then it was a movie that just kind of like reached through the screen and shook me by the lapels and smacked me around, and this is a similar movie to that it's like, oh, I didn't know that you could do this. It's so purely cinematic, it's so transgressive, it's creating its own kind of language using all the tools that we're familiar with, like you said, Ryan, and some incredible practical in-camera tricks that just give it this wonderful otherworldly vibe. And, you know, we talk about Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman. I think they've both done wonderful work outside of this, but as much as I love the Spike Jonze collaborations with Charlie Kaufman, I think this is just a perfect meeting of the minds. Michel Gondry is so uniquely well suited to bring this to life. And you mentioned The Science of Sleep, just kind of having like the Michel Gondry patina without the Charlie Kaufman voice to back it up. I think that The Science of Sleep was actually like co-written by Michel Gondry's daughter when she was really young. Like a lot of it is based on her dreams and stuff. So I mean, whatever that's worth, it may not be advisable to go from working with an Oscar award-winning screenwriter to a child.
There's a scene of him fucking a Xerox machine in that movie, I think. What's his daughter? Deal.
I may be misremembering that, but I think that was like a weird collaboration, kind of similar to Nobuhiko Obayashi's Hasu. I think he co-wrote that with his daughter as well. But this is it's just kind of a magical movie, and I think I hear this echoed from a lot of folks our age, that this was kind of a formative movie for them, not only because it awakens you to the possibilities of the cinematic art form, but also underneath all the bells and whistles, this is still just a really lovely, universal, heartache breaking up and making up kind of story. Like if you cut out all the sci-fi elements, it still has a really strong foundation between these characters. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, so we're going to do a quick recap, but before we do that, I just want to give people a reminder that we are live right now, so there's a live chat going on. So if you're in the live chat, give us your thoughts. Is this a tragic movie? Is it a sad movie? What do you think about memory? Would you have your memories erased? Do we need to live through tragedy and things like that to develop any sort of like true openness in society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Give us your thoughts in the live chat. And also a reminder that we are live on Twitter as well. We have our very own Twitter page. It is SMTM_pod. That's SMTM_pod. So make sure you go give us a follow over on Twitter. We're going to be tweeting out and retweeting out articles, extra thoughts, meanderings, things like that. All right, quick recap. Now, this is kind of a linearized version of a non-linear story, but just kind of bear with me here and we'll kind of start pulling things apart on the other side. All right, so after a fight, Joel Barish learns that his girlfriend Clementine has had her memories of him entirely erased by a company called Lacuna. Absolutely destroyed, he decides to have the same procedure performed. As he's undergoing the procedure, his unconscious begins to resist the erasing process and tries to hide memories of Clementine deeper and deeper in his mind. While under one of the Lacuna employees performing the procedure, Patrick leaves the apartment to visit his new girlfriend, who happens to be Clementine. Now, we learn that Patrick fell for Clem while they were performing the procedure on her, and he has been using Joel's and Clementine's memories to manipulate her feelings for him. Now, as the memories being erased in Joel become happier towards the beginning of the relationship, Joel starts to resist the erasing process even harder until he finally comes to the day that they first met on a beach at Montauk, which is in the East Hamptons. During this replay of the memory, Clem whispers to meet her there. We also learn at this time that one of the Lacuna employees, Mary, previously had an affair with the lead doctor, Stan. She had her memory erased, but when her attraction for him returns, she learns about their sordid past. So she decides to steal all the files from the Lacuna offices and mail all the Lacuna patients, explaining to them about the procedures that they've all had performed. Now, when Joel wakes from his memories being erased, he skips work and heads to Montauk, and this is actually the opening scene of the film. He heads to Montauk and he meets Clem on the train. They spend this incredible day and night together, and the next morning she decides to stop by her apartment to get her toothbrush before heading back to his house so that she can get a snooze. But while she's there, she receives that package from Mary, now at the end of the film. She receives the package from Mary explaining that she had this procedure done. So she reads the note in the car with Joel, and she begins to play this cassette tape of her self-confession, explaining why she wanted the procedure performed. Both her and Joel are rightly freaked out, totally confused. Joel kicks her out of his car, thinking that she's playing some kind of trick on him. But then later, Clem goes to Joel's apartment where he's playing his confession tape after having read the note that was sent to him by Mary, all about Clem and their relationship and why he wanted his memory erased. They're shocked at the bitter memories that they have for each other, and then knowing what their budding relationship might turn into, they sit in a hallway, they look at each other, and they decide to take the risk anyway. All right, now before we get into peeling this whole thing apart, I got to give a shout out to our sponsor for this week's episode, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community. You've heard me talk about them before. It's this great place where you can connect with other like-minded people and creatives, and where you can explore projects that you're passionate about. And this is why Skillshare is so rad, because you can unleash your creativity and you can pursue your passions right from the convenience of your own home. They offer thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics such as video for Instagram, editing, drone filming, iPhone photography, classes on improving your productivity, artivism, etc., etc., etc. So if you want to explore your creativity and connect with some really cool people, go to Skillshare.com/SMTM. That's Skillshare.com/SMTM, and you'll actually get a free trial of their premium membership. So if you want to get that free trial and take advantage of their premium membership, go to Skillshare.com/SMTM, or you can click the link down in the show notes. All right, so let's start talking about this film. When you first think about this film, what is the theme that sticks out in your mind more than anything? Ryan, is it love? Is it memory?
Love.
Is it heartache? Is it pain? It's love. Okay, so what do we think?
It's love.
What does this film say about love?
What does the movie say about love? I mean, I think it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all, baby.
Damn.
You know, it's that old adage.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, even if you know how your life is going to end and how a relationship's going to end, is it worth going through the journey to get there, even if you know it ends badly?
And the answer is?
And the answer is fuck yeah for me. And I think this movie is trying to make you say yes too. I will say, to my point also about who deserves more credit for this movie, as much as like we already talked about how awesome the ending is. Now, if Charlie Kaufman had his way, the ending of the script is they literally keep erasing their fucking minds over and over again until they're elderly people. So they like are in this habitual cycle of a relationship. And that's way sadder, right? So if they've done this whole process multiple times, to me that kind of, in a weird way, a little bit negates it, but not really. But I think it's a more powerful ending to just be like, all right, we know this happened once. Let's try not to let it happen again. You know, I think the ending we got is more magical.
Certainly less bleak, yeah.
Yeah, certainly less bleak. But so
then
Gondry,
does Lacuna, because I think we need to assume that Lacuna goes out of business after this. So in the original drafts, then does Mary not out the process? Like how would they continue to have their memories erased if the company gets discredited?
I don't think that plot line was in there. I think if I'm correct about that. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's what I think that they're saying about love. And what do you guys think?
Yeah, Raymond.
Well, I think there's a really wonderful question, or not really question. There's kind of an implication at the heart of all this, that because they keep just sort of papering over their breakups, and they paper over their mistakes, and they never have the opportunity to learn from those. Like you said, Ryan, it may be as simple as, you know, it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. These are folks who are choosing to never love. They're hitting the I never loved at all button over and over and over again. And I think it's one of those things that, like, you can see maybe some optimism that they will, if Lacuna is shutting down and that button is removed from, you know, the table, essentially. You could see a world maybe in which I don't necessarily know if they're right for each other, but at the very least they will have the benefit of learning from the mistakes that they make in an earnest and you know, formative way going forward. So I do think it's optimistic in that way, but there's a few folks who have been sounding off in the chat already, kind of taking apart these themes. Tony Baloney said, "This is not a tragic movie. Two people are choosing the same path, knowing the way they may make the same mistakes and break up again, but that is their choice, and there's freedom in that choice," which I think is a really interesting perspective through which to read this film. And Jason Seeley sounded off right after him saying, I think even if their next attempt at a relationship falls short, it's important that they live it. It's important that next time they don't delete the memories, the growth alone would be a good step forward. And I kind of agree with that notion that whatever heartache they may be experiencing, of course, is temporary. What matters is that they experience it, they process it, they learn how to grieve, they learn how to let go in a natural and mature way, and they learn how to accept loss. But of course, that makes for a slightly less interesting movie than people darting around Jim Carrey's deteriorating memories and such.
And Beanbox in the chat said, love is hard work, which I not only agree with, but I think that is kind of embedded in the movie too. Is that
the movie's tagline
God damn it, these things are hard.
Brain damage.
Yeah,
It's
hard to keep a relationship. Keep going.
No, it is. There's a couple of philosophers that I've gleaned from a lot. You've heard me talk about Byung-Chul Han probably on this podcast many times, who's written a book called The Agony of Eros. It's like 50 pages. The first chapter is all about the Lars von Trier film Melancholia, so I would really recommend this book. It's pretty accessible as well, The Agony of Eros. And then there's another book by one of my favorite French philosophers named Alain Badiou called In Praise of Love. And here's just a little quote from Badiou. He says, "Love is, above all, a construction that lasts. We could say that love is a tenacious adventure. The adventurous side is necessary, but equally so is the need for tenacity. Real love is one that triumphs lastingly, sometimes painfully, over the hurdles erected by time, space, and the world." And Badiou, in this book, Praise of Love, one of the things he talks about is how oftentimes we are fed what he calls like a flaccid romanticism that's all about the encounter, right? You get the encounter where two people become one, right? And they sort of like, they lose their identities and they get caught up in the moment, the event where they kind of meld into one. And Badiou says, and there's nothing wrong with that encounter in that moment. That's fantastic. He says, but that's romance. That's not love. He says, real love is actually a transformation of seeing the world from the perspective of one, a disjunction between these two people, to seeing the world from the perspective of two. And that's the difference between the moment in the encounter where you kind of lose yourselves with each other, which can be great and wonderful and passionate and sensual and all the adjectives. But the real lasting love, what Badiou is getting at, is where you see the world from the perspective of two. And I think what you get in this film is a stark contrast of two. You get these two people, one, the introverted kind of artist on the one side, and then you get this really extroverted, maybe she is kind of like overcompensating. As she says, she's like, I'm not a concept, I'm just a fucked up girl, right? So you get these two people that absolutely have a uniqueness about them, and they do come together to see the world as two. And in the end, what you get is them kind of making this agreement that, you know what, this might end badly, but there's something worth it. We're going to take the risk and we're going to be faithful to, or in Badiou's terms, we're going to have fidelity to. There's faithfulness to that connective moment, and we're going to do what Badiou again calls a two-scene, right? We're going to see the world from the perspective of two, even despite the fates. And this is why Nietzsche is also an important person as well, because Mary quotes Nietzsche, right? Mary quotes Nietzsche a couple times, and it's this quote that says, "Blessed are the forgetful, for they get the better even of their blunders." And Nietzsche famously has this concept called amor fati, which is the love of fate, right? And Nietzsche kind of gives this thought experiment. He says, if you could imagine that the world was eternally returning, and it was the return of the same over and over and over and over again, how would you commit yourself to that life? Would you reactively and passively accept your fates and just get negative and get down and get resentment, what Nietzsche calls ressentiment? Would you just get down and let the external fates determine your moods and your passions and your path? Or would you flip the script on the fates and laugh in the face of it and love it and essentially be like, fuck you, I'm going to take the active approach to this fate and I'm going to commit myself to it full steam ahead? And that's when I think you get at the end of this film is it's these two people saying, we know that we could possibly just fall back into this cycle where we hate each other and you think I'm terrible and I think you're annoying and boring or whatever it is. But you know what? Fuck it. It's worth it anyway. We're going to take the risk and we're going to leap into the darkness. We're going to leap into the unknown. We're going to leap into that. And I love that. It's like screaming in the face of the fates and saying, fuck you, we're going to do it anyway. And that's what I think is that's the risk of love, right? Rather than it being, it's a perfect match. You're perfectly, you're one. You've got these traits that I want, and I have these traits that you want, and it's a perfect commodity exchange. It's opening up to the risk in the face of potential pain and difficulty and the heartache. And that's what I think. That's why I don't think this film is actually tragic at all. And I felt like a really kind of lovey-dovey warmth come over me as I was watching it at the end because of that boldness in the face of fate.
Yeah,
absolutely. You said that really well.
This may not be respected philosophy. It may, in fact, be a bit of soap opera wisdom. But I can't remember who said this. But I think of the words "love means giving someone permission to hurt you." And I think when you talk about those moments where they're infatuated with each other, the chemistry, the intrigue and the mystery that each one of them represents for the other, this sort of like notion of this balance that, oh, this person would complement my life because I'm up here and he's down there, or vice versa. It is kind of funny to consider, how many times they've erased each other. There's at least one that we know of within this film. Obviously, it happened multiple times in past drafts. There are aspects of the movie that allude to these notions that other characters surrounding them have maybe undergone similar procedures. So we can't, I don't know that we can be 100% sure. But I really, I really like the notion that this is just, they have fallen in love, not necessarily with each other, but they have quite literally just fallen in love with their memories of each other. These really happy memories of each other. And of course, that's what they're going to regret when those things start to get erased, is like, oh, these are the good moments. I don't want you to erase her. But in reality, quite likely, he really just wants to hold on to these memories because they mean something to him. And once again, he's never going to have the benefit of being able to learn from this experience or learn from these mistakes. And that is something that, like, man, those scenes between the two of them, the two scenes at which they're first meeting, they really, really crackle with that chemistry and that intrigue. And then as things start to deteriorate, it just becomes that question, like you were saying, Austin, of like, how can we get back to this one feeling that it may not be love, but my God, it was better than this.
Yeah.
Totally. Also, I think that you brought up the word fate and stuff in this context. It's cool because it's like they're kind of doing what a time travel movie would normally do, but it's not a time travel movie and it's based in, science, quote unquote. And it's kind of telling, to me, it's saying something about how you are drawn to certain people, even
that's it.
It's not necessarily even fate. It's just kind of like, if my mind was erased today, would I still end up doing the same routine and same stuff I'm doing, day to day anyway? And I think that, you can make the argument that Charlie Kaufman is saying, you are drawn to certain attributes and stuff. And then also the whole subversion of the manic pixie dream girl, I think
I was just going to bring that up.
About. Yeah. Because to me, like that's also involved with what we're talking about, because he's a very subdued guy. He's the Charlie Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman always has a Charlie Kaufman in his
That's
script,
right.
like Woody Allen, and Jim Carrey.
And he's
Charlie
neurotic,
Kaufman.
and the film begins with that inner monologue, right, where he's like, "Why am I so weird?" Essentially, right, which is Charlie Kaufman's own inner monologue.
Totally, yeah. And to me, this is like the first Manic Pixie Dream Girl I ever. Whenever I heard Manic Pixie Dream Girl, they were referencing this movie, but I love that they kind of talk about that in the film, like Kate Winslet has that whole thing where it's like, look, I'm not a concept to you. I'm not somebody that's just going to come and but they set her up as the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, but then they later on make her a more deeper character, and kind of I think that was such a cool, the way they did it, so awesome, because at first you think, oh, this is just the Jim Carrey's love interest in the movie, but then it becomes this whole it becomes about both of them and how both of them see each other and how both of them fit into each other's lives. And yeah, at the end of the day, a relationship can't just survive for forever if it's just, oh, I need you because of your good qualities and whatever, all the bad stuff. Right. Who gives a shit, or not who gives a shit, but I can't deal with that, Yeah.
And I think, Jim, I think Joel does learn. Like, one of the things we get in this is by him going through his memories and him replaying the memory where she says to him, like, men try to get this from me and I'm not a concept, I'm just a fucked up girl, whatever. Mm-hmm. He says, I know that and you told me that, I still thought you would save me, right? But I think by him acknowledging that, the scene at the end then gives us a little glimmer of hope that maybe they will fall into some of those pitfalls, but maybe he won't idealize her too much, right? In the same way, right? Maybe there is a chance that the resentments and frustrations that they had the first go around were because they were dealing with each other at the level of pure fantasy rather than actually kind of trying to connect in any sort of, for lack of a better term, realism. But maybe by him going through those memories, he was able to kind of become better adjusted, if you will, to his own anxieties that caused him to be attracted to her, to thinking that he was going to be saved by her, that somehow she was going to change him. And maybe now it's like, hey, guess what? We know this, and let's now take a proactive stance rather than be so reactive to our traumas.
But he doesn't know this. His mind's erased at the end.
Yeah, well,
there's still a seed that's planted in his mind.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, and that's that fate seed we're talking about.
To kind of dovetail off of what you were saying, Austin, it is important to note, because I think I'm kind of surprised at how every time I watch this, I kind of lose track of this notion, but it is important to keep in mind throughout the film that the Clementine, once again, kind of as I mentioned before, that's being erased from his head, that he's interacting with in these memories, that is like goading him forward and asking him to save her and hide her in these other, like, that is a figment of his imagination.
That's his, exactly.
Exactly. That's his projection of Clementine that he hopes essentially reciprocates the same feelings that he is rediscovering in that moment. So it is like, it's one of those things that is really kind of densely layered, that, as you're saying, he's discovering these things about himself and about his predicament and about his relationship within the folds of these memories, Austin. But all of those lessons that he is ostensibly taking away from those memories are fabrications of his mind. So that's right. It is like, I mean, you do get the sense, I think maybe, I don't know, this is a rough estimate, but maybe real Clementine is 50% of Kate Winslet's performance and memory Clementine is 50% of Kate Winslet's performance. Whatever the balance is, you still come away from this movie thinking like, oh, they could actually be way worse off than we actually even know. Because so much of our connection to Clementine as an audience member, connecting with a character in as much as we can, is once again filtered through the lens of his memory, and especially the happiest ones.
They could be better off, because maybe the bad memories, certainly. Maybe even the bad, like when they're short with each other and when he's grumpy with her and when she's like cutting him down, maybe that is his own sort of traumatic encounter with these other less hostile actual engagements, right? But it's just that he could only deal with them. That's right. And this is, I think, another really important theme that we could talk about is Freud talks about this, that every memory is a misremembering. And that is that every time we remember something, it is a fabrication. It's an act of the imagination. You never
nostalgia,
have a perfect...
Baby.
That's it. It's always
I love
filtered.
How this
and our emotions in the moment...
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I was cutting you off.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I cut you off. All I was going to say is that I love how this movie visualizes that with these simple tricks of like putting the diffusion behind Jim Carrey as he's walking around, so the rest of the world looks fuzzy, other than the one, because that's how memory works. Like you fixate on the important thing in the moment, but you maybe don't. There's a deleted scene from this movie where Clementine is correcting Jim Carrey's memory of like, what dress was I wearing? And he says, oh, you were wearing such and such dress. And she goes, no, I bought that once we were together. I couldn't have had that during this memory because we hadn't been together long enough for us to buy it, and blah, blah, blah. And I just, sorry to derail your philosophical point. I just wanted to make an aesthetic point, which is that I think the way that Michel Gondry does all these in-camera tricks to so beautifully realize the intricacies and the way that he aestheticizes something as intangible as a memory, I think is just like, it feels natural the way that the world kind of, buzzes out around him, or people's faces go blurry. Or there's even one scene that they said in the special features that no one in the audience ever noticed when they were doing test screenings, where like one of Clementine's legs is missing because when she's like walking down the street and the car falls out of the sky. And they removed one of her legs when she's walking down the sidewalk, because they were like, the important thing that he would remember at that moment is her momentum and the fact that she's just trying to get away. And there's nothing, there's something like animalistic and raw and urgent about it. And to that end, we were like, oh, what's a way to signal that? And it's like, they digitally removed one of her legs and nobody notices it. Wow. It's just weird little things like that really do kind of, I mean, this movie does, you guys have both talked about how when you look back on it, there are moments and images. It's such an indelible film. Like, honestly, I think I've maybe watched this movie twice. I watched it once in high school, and I watched it a few months ago. And instead of giving it a rewatch this week, I watched all the special features and stuff like that. But it is so distinct and so specific and so indelible. I feel like, I could talk about every minute of this movie, but sorry for cutting you off.
No, I think this is really important too, because we can talk about the themes and the concepts of the film, but the wonderful thing about cinema as a language in itself is that it communicates in its own right. We don't need to always subject it to our conceptual thinking. And I think when visual storytelling is done really well, it's doing precisely what you're talking about. Now I'm sure that Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman and whoever else, Pierre and whoever else was on the kind of production team, can't forget Pierre, I'm sure they sat around and they had all these conceptual themes that were like, how can we translate these ideas via a visual medium? I'm sure. But at the same time, you can just go and watch this film, and you don't need to fucking know about psychoanalysis, and you don't need to give a fuck who Nietzsche is, and you can still get so much from this film, because I think it's so seductive almost in how the aesthetic pulls you in. The color palette, there's this one scene where they're on the beach and they're laying in this bed, and the blues, it's like these really muted, soft blues, and there's the snow, and then even the quilt that they're using as their blanket kind of has this really lovely, I think it's red and blue, but it's so subtle and nice. The way that it's got a very dreamlike quality to it. And I think it fits so well that it just pulls you in and pulls you along the storytelling without being, unlike some of of Kaufman's other films, it's not without being too heavy-handed. Anomalisa, I think, is a great film because philosophy nerds can sit around and talk about solipsism and what it's like to be trapped in your own mind. And you get a little bit of that in this, where you're like, wait, but if your memories aren't real, then how can you ever connect with anybody? And how do you know that you ever had a real experience? And maybe I'm just trapped in my mind all the time, and everything is just a figment of my own imagination, and I don't really ever connect with another person. Well, Anomalisa is that, but on fucking steroids. And it's like, yeah, guess what? Puppets. You are trapped. You are trapped in your own fucking mind, And this one, it doesn't have that, because it still has something that roots us in the world. It grounds us somehow in something real, and I think that's a real testament to the filmmaking prowess of the team.
One final note on aesthetics for now. Oh, sorry, Ryan. I was just gonna say I love how analog everything is. I love that they don't try to over science the science fiction elements of it. They're like, yeah, just kind of sit in this chair and look at this bauble and we'll click around on this old computer. And I mean, it is what it is. It's like in Inception, how they're like, oh, how do we share the dream space? I don't know, you stick a little cord under your sleeve. And it was made by the military. Don't worry about it. But sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Shit. What the fuck was I talking about? What were you just talking about, Austin? You're talking about these stuff. Oh yeah, no. this movie just, in terms of all the practical stuff and all the analog effects and whatever, this movie makes you want to be a filmmaker, I feel like. At least it did for me. I totally, like, was a life-changing movie in the sense that, like, I'm like, oh, man, that's the kind of movies I want to make, is these kind of inventive, stylistic movies that are trying to say something cool that you can relate to. And I think the nostalgia also does that. I think that like gives you that feeling, at least, you know, growing up when you're in high school, you're watching this movie and like just what it's about. And then it also kind of moved, you had brought up Kill Bill Volume 1 as a sister movie to this in terms of it coming out this similar time, and it's just kind of using the medium to its fullest. And I would throw in like Fight Club as that, where it's like, it is such a well-made movie. It's using all the tools for cinema, and more importantly, I think that it also has these like little sound bites, these little like lines, and it's a very quotable film where and it pertains to everybody's everyday life in a weird way. Yeah. You can kind of take little parts of Fight Club, and I think this movie too, and be like, oh yeah, this, you know, I've seen this in my life. Yeah. And yeah, there was this very crystallized like 7 to 8 years there in the late 90s to early 2000s where, you know, all these guys like David Fincher, Michel Gondry, Spike Jonze, Charlie Kaufman, you know, that whole gang from like the Big Brother magazine and stuff were just making the most visually interesting but really solid script writing. I guess Charlie Kaufman's responsible for a lot of that. And yeah, I hope one day we can get back to that golden era again. Let's do it, guys. Let's do it, everybody.
Well, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, Ryan, not to get on like a total filmmaking tangent here, Austin, but I think especially when you watch a movie like this where they're doing these huge ideas, but the way, as I mentioned before, the way that they're carrying them off, I mean, that scene where Clementine is like teleporting around the apartment was done with, you know, a bunch of trap doors, and they just had Kate Winslet like run as fast as she could. And there's all these like, both Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet talk a lot about how Michel Gondry was just like, you know, they'd have all this stuff on the page and they go, okay, how are we going to realize this? And they soon kind of came to the realization that anytime they ask him that question, invariably the most obvious, but also probably the most complicated answer would be the answer. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to use green screens and doubles. It was like, well, they did use doubles in this, but it's at that point in time, you think, oh, are we gonna just CGI us everywhere? And no, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna do like take after take after take until you can nail these two different. The scene where Jim Carrey is in the chair and he's watching from the door, and while he's talking to Tom Wilkinson. In that scene, it's literally like every time the camera slowly pans over Tom Wilkinson's face, Jim Carrey's just running behind the camera to get into the other spot. And there's just like, you know, you say, Ryan, that this is the kind of movie that wants you to make that makes you want to make movies. And I think that's a testament to doing so much stuff so inventively in camera, finding new takes on old genres or old formulas. And, you know, it doesn't cost $100 or $200 million to tell a simple story very, very effectively. But sorry for the tangent.
No. These are the tangents that are good, because I think a lot of people that listen to us are either filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers, or they don't know if they want to be a filmmaker, but they love it. And I think that this is definitely one of those types of films. I feel the same way when I watch like a Guy Madden film, where I'm like, really? Oh fuck, I just want to get together with my friends and like come up with like weird shit and then just like do it. And that's what I did for years and years when I was living in Scotland. Like I made like fucking 15 films, short films. We did 48-hour film festivals, music videos, online things, and like it was just a group of people. You know, like there were 3 of us in the main core and then like 8 of us that we were constantly working with, and we just churned shit out. And when I think about like the artistic stuff that I've created in my life, some of my favorite times are just doing the Edinburgh 48-hour film festival, and you've got 48 hours to fucking make a film, and you enter it and you enter the competition and you do it, and it's fucking great. Like it just makes me feel like you can do good storytelling as long as you have a passion, you have an idea, and you have a group of people who are all committed to it, right? And that's, of course, something you can scale up and down depending on time, budgets, etc., skill set, experience, etc., etc. But there's something profoundly marvelous about being able to do that. And it's the same when I was in a band. It's the same thing. It's that kind of like what we were talking about last week. It's that DIY ethic. It's like, fuck it, let's go out and do stuff. Yeah. And I think this film makes you kind of feel like they were doing that, even though they had a budget and it's actually like, it's got stars and all that other shit. You feel like, no, this is a passion project from these people. And that to me is so alluring.
You were sweeting.
Speaking of Guy Madden,
sweeting with your friends.
Oh, sure. Speaking of Guy Madden, though, have you seen the movie he made with his dog, the short film? It's called like Spanky Goes to the Beach, or Spanky Goes to the Pier. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so the only reason I bring it up is that, well, you mentioned Guy Madden, but it's literally like he went to the beach with his little dog, and he took tons and tons of footage of it just running around the beach and being a happy dog. And then he edited into the most like nightmarish and disconcerting, like disjointed, expressionistic black and white. It's like, it's so creepy and just unsettling. But I bring that up because I think it's a testament to what all branches of filmmaking can do and how they can come together to make an interesting story. And while we're on the filmmaker praise kick right now, this movie, to dovetail off of what I was saying about Guy Madden, has phenomenal editing.
Oh yeah,
this is such a wonderfully edited picture that was like, this movie could very easily have gotten lost in the sauce. And when you watch a handful of the deleted scenes and stuff, you're like, oh, I can't imagine this movie at that pace. So I looked up his name because I don't want to butcher it, but I probably still will. The editor of this film, Valdis Oscarsdottir, did a wonderful job with it. He also he edited Festin, which is one of
my favorite films. Vinterberg
indie films of I think the first Dog Me 95 film, the second one.
Yeah.
But yeah, just shout out to that. Credit where credit's due, because this movie could totally fall apart if the editing weren't on point.
This is also a testament to needing public funding sources, right? Now, I know this film was not like publicly funded by, but someone like Guy Madden, is able to do a lot of the stuff he does because he's able to get little grants from, the Manitoba Council of the Arts, or the Canada Council of the Arts, or the Toronto Arts Council, or something like that.
That's a thing pretty much anywhere except for America.
Well, goddamn it, Austin, if it was worth making, you could make a buck on it at the box office, all right? I don't want to hear any of that fucking shit.
Well, the film that we did that was directed by Isaiah Medina was a feature film based on an adaptation of a book, and we got about 80 or 90 grand from the Canadian government, from a couple of different
the taxpayers
that were funding these projects, right? From the taxpayers. And this is important. We got to build out our arts communities by having publicly funded options so that we can make these kinds of films. Because, like Ryan, you were just saying a minute ago, you want to be able to go back to these things. The way that the platform economy is moving with streaming services and things like that, in one sense, it makes it so there's more opportunities for filmmakers to make weird shit. But at the other end of the spectrum, all of these things have to drive eyeballs, right? And unless you can drum up support by driving eyeballs, it's really difficult to get the more experimental things made. So it's like this, we're caught in this weird position, and I don't know, I would love to see more of these types of interesting and conceptual and aesthetically challenging projects made. I just don't know that we're headed in a direction where we're going to have too many opportunities unless we do figure out ways. You disagree?
Oh yeah, I think that there's tons of it's an economics thing. I think this movie was a smash hit too. So to me, it was probably a good time to make a movie like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind right after this movie came out. Yeah. But
the economics of the film industry were just very, very different than
exactly. Yeah, totally.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah. So it's like that's a whole other thing for sure. Conversation. What were we were just talking about something before the economic argument, though.
Guy Madden
and a whole point.
God,
Guy Madden
Matt,
in indie filmmaking.
How much you love the saddest music in the world.
making films with your friends and shit like that.
Oh well, whatever.
How we need more Dracula pages from A Virgin's Diaries.
Oh yeah, no. One little note I was going to bring up was just the fact that Michel Gondry also talked about while he made this movie how he would give different notes to different. He'd tell like all right, Jim Carrey, play this scene really straight. This is a dramatic scene, and then he tells Kate Winslet, all right, this is a super high, amped up comedic scene, so you go crazy. So that he's doing all these weird kind of performance tricks along with his insanely inventive cinematography stuff. So I think he deserves some credit for that kind of stuff too, because I think that it carries over in the movie in terms of giving it this cool feel. People.
Awesome. Well, I mean, this is one of those films that we could keep squeezing and squeezing because there's just so much content and so much goodness that we could juice out of it. But let's leave the conversation there. We definitely want to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts on this film, what this film meant to you, if you have any theories about the film, is there anything we're missing? Is there anything in particular you love about this film? Make sure that you reach out to us. You can either call us and leave us a voicemail, or you can email us. If you want to call us, you can call us at 1-213-534-8807. That's 1-213-534-8807. You can leave us a voicemail. Or, of course, you can email us, movies@wisecrack.co. That's movies@wisecrack.co. We're going to take a couple minutes and get into some emails. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Real quick, I totally remember what I was going to say. I feel like it would behoove us to bring up the quote the movie title is from by Alexander
from Pope Alexander.
From Pope Alexander. And Austin, I'd love for you to give me the meaning on this. How happy is the blameless Vestal's lot, the world forgetting, by the world forgot, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, each prayer accepted and each wish resigned. What does that mean?
I mean, I think
it means all of our listeners have a great new ringtone of your voice reading a great poem.
That's actually true. I wish that I used to have a fucking custom ringtones for all my friends that would call. I'd love to have you just screaming out, "Show me the meaning."
It can happen.
I think I was thinking about this recently. I think it really ties into this sort of Nietzsche stuff as well, but it's that there's something about the mind as like a constant energy source that is able to perpetually and endlessly give and give and give and give, and that's where it's this eternal sunshine is like a sort of like life, a vitality, a source, right? And I think there's something really interesting about that if we take that into consideration with the Nietzsche stuff, where it's like this fate, right? About forgetting, about forgetfulness. Like, is forgetting a good thing or is remembering a good thing? And if you've got a spotless mind, is the spotless mind the mind that is cleansed, that is non-traumatized, that doesn't have any scratches and scars? Like, what exactly are we kind of trying to fight through, and how can like a vital life like push us through to either overcome or to affirm or to kind of work through the kind of pains and traumas of life, things like that? I don't know, Raymond, what do you think, man?
I think in the context of this movie, and especially in the context of who delivers that poem, which is Kirsten Dunst's character, there is kind of a have y'all seen the Lego movie?
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to keep this detour brief, but there's that moment in there where Morgan Freeman's character sort of reads off the big, highfalutin poem about how he's the chosen one, or whatever the context of it is, and the last line of it is, all this is true because it rhymes.
Yeah.
And there is this kind of naivete associated with Kirsten Dunst's character a little bit, where because she's on the cutting edge of this program, and because she has this sort of internal understanding of how it works, and maybe for lack of a better term, she's sort of drinking the Kool-Aid on this thing, and she's all in on Tom Wilkinson, which kind of calls to mind some other themes that maybe, these things kind of recurring, that she's always going back to him and fucking up his marriage the way that Joel and Clem are always going back to each other, that there is something elemental that can't really be accounted for within the intellect. I think all those are ideas that Charlie Kaufman is playing with, but I think at this point in the script, the ideas that Mary is playing with is like, well, this sounds profound. and this is my interpretation of this profound sounding thing. So I kind of just, it's one of those things that's like, it becomes self-affirming, this notion that like what we're doing is a completely unqualified good. You know, Tom Wilkinson, you're a genius. This is brilliant. This is like, we provide this public service. We're changing lives for the better, yada, yada, yada. And I think so much of that is like, you know, fuck the user feedback. Forget about the fact that we're deliberately inducing brain damage. Forget about the lives that we're permanently altering or perhaps traumatizing or re-traumatizing when this whole house of cards comes crashing down. There's this poem that I really like, and it just feels profound to me, and maybe that elides all of those concerns.
And maybe the eternal sunshine is the sort of like eternal naive optimism of a mind that is spotless, right? Like if you have your memory wiped clean, there's nothing to drag you down. There's no gravity to kind of pull you backwards, right? So there's something about that.
And Sydney Barrett in the chat just made my point much more clearly and concisely. She said the movie is a thesis against that quote. Well, but I don't think that means Kirsten Dunst believes it any less.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. Is that it has the movie, I think, is supposed to be almost the title's supposed to be kind of tongue in cheek, right? Where it's like Kirsten Dunst is saying it very genuinely and earnestly. But like, honestly, would you really want a spotless mind and the eternal sunshine that's associated with it? You're supposed to, I think, kind of come away with that. It's like, yeah, that'd be great. You wouldn't have anything to, any worries at all. But is that, like, clearly that's not better than living your life and going through the bumps and bruises of it all, you know? Like, that's how I take it, is that it's like prodding you and saying like, oh yeah, you want a spotless mind? You really don't, you know?
Yeah. No, it's a freaking great movie. There's, again, so much that we can think about. Give us, sound off in the chat, sound off in the email. Let us know, movies@wisecrack.co. I'm just going to dip into one question. Now, this is kind of going back in the vault a little bit, but all three of us have seen Django Unchained. So this is from Tamello. Sure. Says, hey, this is Tamello, and I've recently rewatched the Django Unchained episode. During the scene where a slave is killed by dogs, we're introduced to Mr. Stonecipher and his gang. One of them is a mysterious lady with an axe and a mask on, played by Zoe Bell. She's given some importance with her solo scene. Do you think she is significant to the story, or is it this movie's less effective version of the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, a small mystery to inspire discussions? What do we think? Is this something that Tarantino does? Is he trying to... Is this a clever film device? What's going on here? What do we think?
This is Quentin Tarantino. Sorry, go.
All I was going to say is this is a whole different conversation, because I think that movie kind of falls apart in the second half. But my theory on Zoe Bell's character and the way that she's presented as this kind of like spaghetti western Boba Fett is either that, you know, he's good friends with Zoe Bell and he likes casting her in his movies and wants to give her this kind of iconographic role that is very stoic, in the same way that, you know, maybe he even would cite Boba Fett if you asked him about his inspiration on that, or quite possibly, and I would say maybe more likely, there's just a bunch of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor that would have developed those folks further.
No, I think he was trying to like just plant the seeds, you know, and he does this, and very effectively, I think, in the first couple movies. Like Pulp Fiction has those like weird loose threads where like, ooh, I want, you know, like he said, the briefcase. Not explain, the whole movie's about that. It's kind of this MacGuffin, this mysterious MacGuffin, and it's cool how it works. But then I think he got drunk on that idea and being like, oh man, I'm just going to pack my movie with Easter eggs and people will want to like figure it all out. And I'm so to the point where I like, who gives a shit? You know, it doesn't make the movie better to me. Like his movies are so loose now, at least like with Once Upon a Time. I know a lot of people love that movie and stuff, but
big fan of that.
Yeah, like exactly, like kind of start there. Yeah, he just does that all the time now to me, to where it's too much, and I cease to care. So that's just my take. Yeah. Sorry.
Real quick, I'm just going to read an email because we literally just got this email about Eternal Sunshine, and that's the fastest fucking email that I have ever received.
During the show.
From this, during the show, so I just want to read it. It's from Tony.
Turn and burn. Let's do it.
Tony says, I appreciate that several times in the conversation this was referred to as a high school movie, as that was when I too encountered it, though I have noticed more and more as I've rewatched it growing up. I believe we are people defined by our memories and learned experience for better or for worse. This movie informed my better senses to hold that opinion. I also believe it taught me about healthy boundaries for love and relationships by what Joel and Clem did wrong in addition to what they did right. I love the entire subversion of the manic pixie dream girl stereotype, which was also successfully subverted in 500 Days of Summer, a conversation for another time. And as I said, there is freedom in making the same choice, even if it ends in ruin. Additionally, the soundtrack is A+. John Bryan is a wizard.
Agreed.
Claps.
Oh, yeah,
claps.
Good email.
Claps.
Thanks for the email, Tony.
Good email, yeah.
All right, before we get out of here, where can people find us on the internet? Ryan, where can they find you?
You can find me at Ryan Shorts on YouTube and Instagram and stuff, and Funhouse sometimes. I'm on videos there and editing over there and stuff. So yeah, those two places.
Yeah. Raymond?
You can find me as usual over at Twitter and Letterboxd. I'm at Crematoria. You can also find me on our sister podcast, Wisecrack's Culture Binge. I had the opportunity to sit down with the wonderful Michael Burns and the wonderful Serbi, excuse me, her Twitter handle is Suri. We talked about the Olympics, we talked about Gossip Girl, we talked about tacos. It was a great conversation. And speaking of Tarantino, one more thing to plug. I think near the end of this week, I think it's supposed to come out on the 6th, I wrote a Wisecrack video, book versus film, on the subject of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Sweet.
I'm not 100% sure when that's supposed to come out, but I'll plug it again when it does.
Amazing. And just to give another reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at SMTM_POD. That's SMTM_POD. Get involved in the live chat. Email us movies@wisecrack.co. Call us 1213-534-8807. You can find me and Google me, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all good. We got to get out of here. It's time to go do other shit. Live your lives, love, experience loss, push through it, make movies, do good art, be around good people, learn from your mistakes. Ryan, send us out of here, brother.
Goodbye from Hollywood, California. This has been Show Me the Meaning. Charlie Kaufman, come on our podcast.